Let me ask you something. What makes up your identity? Is it your hometown, your family, your beliefs, or the country you live in? For the early American colonists, identity was mostly local. People thought of themselves as Virginians, New Yorkers, or Bostonians, not as Americans. But by 1776, something had shifted. Through shared struggles and new ideas, colonists began to see themselves not just as British subjects, but as part of something new, an American identity. Today, we're going to trace how that transformation happened, from scattered colonies to a united people ready to declare independence. Before the Revolution, the colonies were incredibly diverse, not just in people, but in how they lived. In New England, life revolved around small farms, trade, and tight-knit religious communities. Many settlers came to escape religious persecution and followed strict Puritan values. The middle colonies, places like Pennsylvania and New York, were more diverse. Cities like Philadelphia were busy ports filled with immigrants, trade, and new ideas. Benjamin Franklin helped shape Philadelphia into a center for learning and innovation. In the southern colonies, large plantations grew cash crops like tobacco and rice. These farms depended heavily on enslaved African labor, creating a very different social and economic structure. Culturally, most people felt loyal to their town or colony. Travel and communication between regions were slow and difficult. So even though they lived in British America, colonists often felt more connected to their local community than to one another. Religion also varied. Some areas were strictly Puritan. Others welcomed a mix of Protestants, Catholics, African spiritual practices, and native beliefs. Among educated colonists, a belief called deism was gaining ground. It emphasized reason and nature as paths to understanding God, instead of traditional church teachings. Despite their differences, the colonies had some shared political structures. Each one had a royal governor, appointed by the king. But more importantly, most colonies had elected assemblies, groups of property-owning white men who made decisions about taxes, budgets, and laws. What made this different from Britain was participation. While only about 1% of British citizens could vote, most white men in the colonies had voting rights. This created a strong tradition of local control and political involvement. In places like New England, town meetings let people discuss local issues. But they weren't always open forums. These meetings often pushed for agreement and unity, rather than debate or disagreement. So while colonists got a taste of democracy, it came with limits, especially for women, the poor indigenous people, and enslaved Africans. For a long time, Britain let the colonies run themselves. This hands-off approach, called salutary neglect, helped colonists build their own systems and sense of independence. But after the French and Indian War ended in 1763, everything changed. Britain was deep in debt and expected the colonies to help pay for it. In 1754, even before the war ended, Benjamin Franklin proposed the Albany Plan of Union, a way to unite the colonies under a shared government. It was rejected at the time, but it planted a seed. His famous "Join or Die" cartoon warned that without unity, the colonies would fail. Then came the Stamp Act of 1765, taxing printed materials. Colonists pushed back hard. They argued, no taxation without representation. 9 colonies sent delegates to the Stamp Act Congress, uniting for the first time in political protest. Groups like the Sons of Liberty and Daughters of Liberty led the charge, organizing boycotts, protests, and acts of resistance. They still saw themselves as loyal to Britain, but believed they were defending their rights as Englishmen. When the Townshend Acts came in 1767, taxing everyday goods like tea, protests only grew stronger. Though many of these taxes were repealed, the tax on tea stayed. In 1773, the protest exploded at the Boston Tea Party, where colonists, some disguised as Native Americans, dumped British tea into the harbor. Similar acts happened in places like Charleston and Chestertown. The message was clear. Colonists were no longer just British. They were becoming something else. As tensions rose, colonists turned to powerful new ideas to justify their resistance. The Enlightenment, a movement focused on reason, science, and individual rights, inspired thinkers like John Locke, who wrote that all people have the right to life, liberty, and property. Colonial leaders, such as James Otis and Patrick Henry, used those ideas to challenge British rule. They argued that if government violated natural rights, people had the right to resist. Then came a turning point. Thomas Paine's pamphlet Common Sense in 1776. It was short, direct, and widely read. 100,000 copies sold quickly. Paine said it was common sense for the colonies to break free. He wrote, "The cause of America is in great measure the cause of all mankind." Suddenly, the idea of independence didn't feel extreme, it felt necessary. That July, the Declaration of Independence was written mainly by Thomas Jefferson, with help from John Adams and Benjamin Franklin. It stated that all people have rights, that governments get their power from a people, and that the colonies were now a free and independent nation. Not everyone agreed. Some colonists stayed loyal to Britain, and others stayed out of it. But the idea of an American identity had taken root. So how did American identity form? It didn't come from one moment. It was a journey. It grew from differences between the colonies, a growing belief in local control, frustration with British rule, and powerful ideas about freedom and equality. What started as 13 very different colonies turned into a people with a shared purpose and a new identity. Here's something to think about. How do the events and ideas that shaped the first American identity still affect what it means to be American today? That's the question we'll leave you with. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and join us next time as we continue our journey through American history.